Is Afrobeats a fad? Let's talk about it, guys. Okay. Disclaimer. Disclaimer, right? I'm talking about the US, Western context, and every other culture or country that's influenced by US and Western media. I'm not talking about is Afrobeats a fad in West Africa, where it originates from, more specifically Nigeria. Obviously, it's not a fad, right? Because people are more consumed by or more interested in Afrobeats than any other genre of music in Nigeria. Can't speak for Ghana, but I imagine it's the same thing. And I don't know about the rest of West Africa, but in terms of Nigeria, people are more interested, are more immersed in Afrobeats than in any other genre of music. So this doesn't apply to the locals, right? The local countries, right? That this music originates from. I am asking, in the US context, is Afrobeats a fad? Now, we know that right now, Afrobeats is the fastest growing genre in music. Its popularity is reaching new heights, and it's obvious why. It's the authenticity of the music, it's the vibe of the music, the originality of the music, and to be honest, I really do believe because, Africa is the birthplace of humanity, there's so much rich history in Africa, and it just is impossible to replicate, to water down. Well, I mean, it could be watered down. We're going to talk about that. But it's hard. Why do people, when they listen to Afrobeats, it's like it's soul music, right? And to some people, it's even deeper than soul music in America, right? Why is that? Something about the beat, the drums, the vocals, it touches your core, your soul. Why is that? Well, because of it's attached to the authenticity of Nigeria, West Africa, and that dates back thousands. You could say, I mean, thousands and thousands of years. So it's dense. I mean, what do I say? It's thick. You can't cut through it, man. It's too thick, man. It's history. It's historic. And so that's, to me, that's what Afrobeats is. That's what it's all about, right? The vibe of it. So back to my question: is it a fad internationally? Well, there are a few things we need to look at, right? I think about reggae and how reggae was super popular. I could say more specifically, Sean Paul was super popular in, I want to say, the early 2000s. Of course, we had Bob Marley before him. We had Bob Marley way before him. But reggae was super popular. Reggae, Beanie Man in the early 2000s, and it kind of was. It was, I mean, mainstream here in America, and of course, when something is mainstream in America, it's marketed across the world, and that becomes mainstream internationally. And so reggae had its moment, and then it kind of fizzled out, right? End of that decade, end of the 2000s, it fizzled out. And then we saw reggaeton. That was in the 10s. Was it the 10s? It came in about the mid 2000s, and probably it had a good amount of time when it was mainstream in America and internationally. I would say from about 2005 up until maybe 2012, it had its moment, and it kind of fizzled out too, right? But irrespective of how well it did in America and internationally, at its home, at its base, it was always relevant. Reggae is still thriving and relevant today in Jamaica and amongst reggae lovers around the world. But that publicity that it got, first with Bob Marley, I'm sure there were people before him, but Bob Marley, Sean Paul, that sort of pushes it to a global audience and introduces it to a global audience and a new generation and makes them want to consume it, right? And then that's the same thing with reggaeton. But the thing about reggaeton is reggaeton doesn't need it doesn't need America. And it's one thing to say one genre needs America or not. But reggaeton is relying on the fact that Spanish is the second most or third most spoken language in the world, right? Spanish is the third most spoken language in the world. The Spanish market is massive. And so it doesn't matter if, I mean, it does matter because it does help get that international push way further coming through America. But it's a thriving business. Reggaeton and all Latin music, it's thriving without the American system, but it does add something for international sales, right? But regardless, from the American context, from the American lens, it was popular. So now let's talk about Afrobeats. Is it a fad? You know, we're seeing everybody paying attention. You know, who was first again? Drake, of course, was first. Did a one dance with Wizkid. Not really kind of Afrobeats-esque. It was more of an Afrofusion song, let's be real. But, you know, he introduced the world into Afrobeats. Then we had all these songs come up, right? Davido came through with If. I'm giving you a quick brief timeline from 2016 up until now. But now we have collaborations with Justin Bieber. We have collaborations. These are the biggest artists in the world. Collaborations with Drake still. Thames has a few with Future. Collaborations with Beyonce, obviously. So much publicity is going to Afrobeats right now. It is the hottest genre right now. It's the fastest growing genre right now. And I tell every musician, if you want to get attention and you can authentically deliver strong Afrobeats, look into making Afrobeats music because the doors will open faster. I think about Thames, who literally was like, she was not even, I think her first song was in 2018. The first song or her second song she ever released or something, 2018. And now she's making songs with Drake. That's fast. You know, it happened on Malay, 2020. His first like song or first hit. And like now he's making songs with Justin Bieber. It's crazy. So it's the fastest growing genre. But I want to talk about how Afrobeats, how it can prevent being a fad. Ultimately, you know, I'll get to that. How can Afrobeats prevent being a fad? Like sort of like reggae. Reggae is still a very thriving industry, but it's not thriving the same way it was thriving in 2005, right? Same as reggaeton. I mean, hey, actually, probably is reggaeton. Again, Spanish market is insane. But when it comes to Afrobeats, now the world is being introduced to Afrobeats. Now that it has a global audience, and that means there's a lot of money coming into Afrobeats. I think the first way and the most important way to ensure that Afrobeats is not just a fad and the industry not only continues to thrive, but it grows and it expands. The first way is reinvestment. I think just like we look at the Spanish market and Spanish music, they put their money right back into their industry. So we have all these like big talents, like the Davidos, the Wizkids, all of those things. But all of them sign these record deals to American labels and they end up probably owning their masters, right? And I talk about this a lot. Ownership is important. Ownership is so important. So we have to make sure that every Afrobeats artist retains ownership of their masters. Super important. And also, they reinvest in the industry. Build better studios. I mean, we have studios and all that stuff, but build an infrastructure for Afrobeats music. We look at someone like Don Jazzy. He's done a great job with Ira Star, with Rema. He's done a great job building an infrastructure in Nigeria to build and market superstars. Tiwa Savage is another one of his people. We need people to do this, to build more infrastructures instead of focusing on one artist being a superstar. Focus on the infrastructure, build out the infrastructure, ensure that Afrobeats gets the attention that it deserves. So that's one thing, reinvesting. And, a lot of people, especially musicians, they love to go, when they take their money, they export it out of Nigeria, buying jewelry, cars, etc. Hey, I'm not going to knock anyone's hustle. If you like what you like, that's great. But we see a lot of Nigerians taking money out of Nigeria and spending it all over the world. It's important to keep the money in Nigeria and invest in Nigeria. It's super important. But again, let's keep going. Another thing that is super important is what I would call don't allow unsupervised cultural appropriation. Now, what does this mean? This means that do not allow people that are not authentic to Nigeria, that do not give respect to, Afrobeats artists and creators. Don't allow them take our music and reuse it and steal it. We're already doing that. Like Nigerian Twitter does a good job of calling out American artists, even the ones that are respectful and collaborate with Afrobeats artists. like I said in another video, we're not going to tolerate people stealing our music and thinking they can get away with that. We do not tolerate that. If you want Afrobeats music, if you want to participate in Afrobeats music, you must empower Afrobeats artists. That's the only way that you can do it without getting blasted on Twitter. And even if you do it, you're still going to get blasted on Twitter anyway. So I think that we have good gatekeepers, and it's not even the musicians. It's actually the fans. They're gatekeepers, ensuring that people do not exploit Afrobeats. So, but when I say don't allow unsupervised cultural appropriation, I'm talking about don't let it get whitewashed and watered down. Now, Afrobeats, like I said earlier, part of what makes Afrobeats incredible is the fact that it's authentic to Nigerian culture. Everything from the music to the sound, it is like soul music. It moves your spirit. It's actually not just soul music, but it's spiritual music. I'm sure those are kind of the same thing, I guess. But it really moves your spirit. So, and that comes from its authenticity to, African or Nigerian ancestry, right? And because of that, if it is whitewashed, it will sound horrific and terrible. And that's why people on Twitter, Nigerian Twitter, are gatekeepers, and they fight. They fight and say, hey, nobody should steal this. They came for Beyonce, they ripped her apart. They came for Justin Bieber. They came for Drake. They'll come for everyone. So we have to continue to gatekeep, ensure that it's not abused. This is not the 60s, where, in America, the way that a lot of white musicians would just steal black musicians' music, steal it, and run and just remake the same exact song. Nah, gone are those days. And I'm glad to see it, that it doesn't even happen. Obviously it doesn't happen in America anymore, but we're not even allowing it in Nigeria, which is important. So that's one thing, right? Then the other thing, the irony is this, in this other thing, I'm kind of saying the opposite of what I just said, because we still have to be inclusive in our collaborations. So don't let it get whitewashed, but be inclusive in the collaborations. Now, what does that mean? And I think it means exactly what is happening right now. These collaborations that we see with Chris Brown, with Beyonce, they make sure to do it with Afrobeats artists. They make sure to keep elements of the authenticity of the music. The fusion, that's where the Afrofusion works. And they also make sure to empower these artists. I remember Future posted, he posted about Thames, like he put Thames is in his latest song. And he kind of was like, he could have taken the sample, because it's a sample. He could have taken the sample and kind of like not credited her as a feature because it's a sample. But he wanted to elevate her and empower her. So he put her on the title. And one thing I love about this is that, especially the Black American artists, but even the Justin Bieber has done this as well, they give respect because they know it's happened to them. African Americans in Africa, in the 60s, when these white musicians would just appropriate, even before that, in the rock and roll. I could go on about this, but rock and roll, country music, this is all Black music. White people kind of like appropriated it and actually just stole it and appropriated it. And so they've had that happen to them, and they gatekept hip hop in the 90s, in the 2000s. Now, what the internet did, they gatekept hip hop and R&B. Now, what the internet did was open that up and allow everyone access hip hop and R&B. And so Drake was also a big component there in opening that. So we in the I want to say around 2010, we started seeing a lot of white boy rappers, a lot of them, and now hip hop. Look what hip hop is now. Not only is it open to anyone to make hip hop, but also hip hop artists have kind of dressed like emo rock and roll artists. I just think it's now just a fusion of just American pop cool culture, right? Still taking elements of Blackness, but also taking elements of whiteness. It's just a mixture of all these things. But my point here is, when it comes to Afrobeats, when it comes to that, collaborations are important, and the ways that our artists are working together, the Beyoncés, the way that they're currently working, I think that just needs to continue. We continue to do these collaborations and keep the name going. Now, ultimately, we don't know if it's going to be a fad or not in the West. We don't know. What we'll tell is if we continue to release hits, continue to release dope music. But even with that, who knows? Needless to say, it definitely is on the international stage. It's not going to be ignored. It can't be ignored. And everybody's paying attention. We don't know what the next fad is going to be, because music always has fads. But ultimately, as long as we do the first thing I mentioned, reinvest, we can continue to thrive even without penetrating the US top charts. And that's just my point. We need to be self-sustained, and we need to ensure that the money is coming globally, and that we don't rely on the US to market us to the world, but we market ourselves to the world. And that's just my 2 cents. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the above. My name is Kenim, and see you next time. A peace.